Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Shahab Karni from Television I-95 Washington Studios. Welcome to my show in Washington Diary. I have with me this morning, uh, I will say, a thinker, scholar, journal, I fondly call him, Lieutenant General retired Asad Durrani from Pakistan joining me, former ISI and MI chief in Pakistan in very critical timings, very important. Welcome to my show, General. How are you today?
Thank you very much, Karan Saab. Grateful to be there.
All right. So when I say scholar and thinker, do you agree with me?
Well, I suppose one took on this challenge after retirement. Before
Right.
retirement, some people used to take a dig at me, and some would call me a crank, and the others would say, "You philosophize things." But I suppose one had this habit of looking at things a little minutely. But
Well,
after
the
retirement,
reason I mentioned that for our viewers, that to his credit, the general have written three different books, which is very unlikely, especially in that region in two nuclear state. When we talk about India and Pakistan, this is very unconventional and unusual. His first book was Pakistan Adrift, second Spy Chronicles, and the third one, latest, is Honor Among Spies. So let's talk about the latest book that you had, General Durrani. What was the reason and what was the thought process that you came up with this book?
it was a very unusual experience because initially I thought that my problem with the headquarters were because of the Spy Chronicles, which I co-authored with the former Raw Chief, um, in all good faith and in the belief that it projected our position very well. And my co-author actually was a person who was very sympathetic to our Kashmir cause. So I did that, and over a period of time, I found out that it was not about the book that the problem started. It had other reasons. Some went back in history because of, we also have affiliations of the retired officers with some of the serving officers. So my old boss, once upon a time, General Baig, was upset for a number of reasons, and now he probably got a chance. This my over a period of time. This was my assessment, and the way the whole thing was conducted, the idea was not only to say why it happened, but also to convey the message that the institutions, and I am, of course, very proud of this institution that I've served, that sometimes these institutions can be misused by some people in power. It has been done in the past many times, um, depending upon, what the environment is. It's not only that the army took over the political power in the country, but sometimes, the twisting of hands, pressurizing politicians. But this was one occasion when I thought that they were doing it with a former member of the fraternity on behalf of some people who were very close to them. When I came to this conclusion, I thought I'll write about it. And what better way to do it but to write a novel, a novelette, conveying what has happened, but at the same time bringing out a few important lessons of what I had learned. And as I said, let me repeat myself, it looked so unusual that no way looked better than putting it down as a book, as a fiction though, but the message had to be clear.
So when people use the term so strongly, some of them, you being labeled as a traitor. So my question to you, sir, is that treachery or not working as per certain individual thought process, couple of them. I will use the name like General Baig, General Kiani, and currently Chief of Staff, General Bajwa, individual. And in that context, when we talk about General Baig, of course, we have seen the crash of General Zia and his critical role at that juncture. Plus, in later on, we saw whatever happened in terms of political manipulation through him, by him. And you were also, you happened to be there also at some point, for that aspect. Then later on, General Kiani with the Abbottabad thing, that whatever happened with Osama bin Laden and the American, and General Kiani's meeting with some of the American general. So those were individual act, and of course, the Baluch regiment was a common factor among all three of these star officers. I call it, I will say, brotherhood from the same infantry. So, do you think your treason was not for the against the state, but maybe you were hurting the egos of certain individual at some point? What do you have to say about that, sir?
Yeah, I think that's a fairly good summation of what happened. Um, I When I came to the conclusion that some institutional connections, or let's say that some affiliations, like belonging to a group or a unit, were now taking the better of the, 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 the hierarchy, then I thought that I was number one. Not only that one had to talk about it, but one was very lucky to have come to certain very strange conclusion. Because when you talk about Canny, I mean, frankly, I was trying to be as uh, as well disposed towards that period as possible, and that is I used to. That's why I used to give that assessment that we were not incompetent, but we had to make some political compromises. But then over a period of time, I found out that that assessment was quite close to. Nowadays, it's no big deal. One goes to Aptabad, one talks to people there, and they say, "What are you talking about? Before the raid, 24 hours or 48 hours before the raid, the roads had been closed. Obviously, we were on board. We did help in one way or the other. But these people, because of the way they conducted it, they uh, they let me in the process. Not that they wanted to, but I found out how it happened. And frankly, Kanisab, the point is, if something like that has happened, and that had brought us such a bad name, the country, the institutions, I had to now go all out and tell people, regardless of whether they were going to be happy or not, both the things that the institutional loyalties I have understood, I've often talked about it, but that it can be used in this particular manner just to cover, a few, let me say, a few professional crimes, that was not going to be acceptable to someone like me. And that's why one went public in a number of ways, not only by writing this book, but otherwise also conveying certain messages that we are, as an institution, we have certain advantages, certain powers, but they can also be misused because that is the nature of power. If you use it for the right purpose, that's very fine. But very often, not only in my case, otherwise too, the way, after all, the courts, there was never any secret about it that sometimes the courts in the past have also been pressurized, arm twisted. One of the former chief justices used to say we compromise with the army. So if these things were now all of them cutting together in a vortex, then how could not a lucky man like me talk about it so that we can, over a period of time, if not immediately, try and correct these things, correct these courses, regardless of what the price I may have to pay.
Well, just for the sake of information to our listener and viewers, ladies and gentlemen, India and Pakistan combined has a population of 1.6 billion people. Both of those nations are nuclearly, I mean, they're nuclear states. So my point that I'm trying to make with General Durrani is that in the developed countries, all the international relations or the military relations and the policies and strategies are done or studied or implemented by the academics, thinkers like one of those General Duranis. But in that region, in India and Pakistan, We lack that, and whenever people like General Durrani comes to the forefront with the thought process, with a thinker mentality, then those people are discouraged and they're even labeled as traitors. So that is the series of deceit and deception in that region. The people and the market economy cannot afford. This is harmful. What are you going to say about that, General Durrani?
Yes, I think there has been a problem for a long time, and I have no doubts that both of us, India and Pakistan, because of the total environment, did have a problem making the required adjustment to normalize relations. India probably more because it's strictly status quo power, and in that status quo, it had a few advantages, and we did not have them. We were managing, certain issues like Kashmir. Now that the opportunity came, and I found a partner on the other side who actually turned out to be very sympathetic to our cause. Just to remind your audience, after Pulwama, he was the most welcome guest on Pakistani channels because he would say those things that people would be happy to hear. Mr. Dulat, I'm talking about a former Raji. With that partner who insisted that the things were bound to improve, and I being, trained as a hard-boiled, cold-blooded analyst, I used to say, no, you people will strictly go by status quo, and you are not likely to, rock it because would not know if you would be able to manage the dynamics of the change. But in deference to your optimism, Mr. Dulat, let's talk about, the environment as well as if an opportunity comes, can we manage it? Can we improve it over a period of time incrementally through certain steps or through a structured mechanism? Now, that is what gave rise to this book. And again, I have to say that there are enough number of people in my institution, some still serving, who have not only appreciated this effort, but actually have said that this book has been very helpful to them, the Spy Chronicles. But it just provided an excuse for some other people to air certain other thoughts. But as far as the relationship is concerned, I'm absolutely convinced that this book, which is now a must read in the Indian strategic institutes, here also it has been read and by the people who like to. I mean, you mentioned initially about the thinking type of people. I mean, those thinkers are, they think that it has shown them a particular way in which um, one got the opportunity and when followed up, the things could improve. Probably post Modi because Modi has for the first time, in Modi we have a person there who is not following real politics. He's following an ideological agenda. So just in case, whenever that changes, I think the framework that has been put together, and when the book was launched, there were enough number of high-flown Indian intellectuals on the other side and the streets on the other side, and so many of them said this seems to be the right framework to proceed. So all that I would say is that this was an effort to try and contain a very bad situation, a potentially very disastrous situation, without claiming that it will happen. But it could happen like this. Now, that is what the book was. That is what the idea was.
Now, sir, the another angle that I needed to talk to you about, that as soon as this latest book were published, I mean, you see a lot of constraints. I mean, in judicial process began against you, I guess, and the media suppression. I mean that under the freedom of expression or opinion, the media based in Pakistan, especially, did not highlighted the features and the points that you raise in this book, whether it was a fiction or novel or whatever. But we know at the end that who and what is the story behind your book. So, what do you see? I mean, is this a healthy environment even in Pakistan for going forward or way forward, or this is a non-starter, sir?
this is the most important point, I believe, for the discussion. It's much more important for me, even my own case and my own experience, my own discomfiture. This point is more important. And that is that, of course, yes, the regimes in Pakistan, sometimes even the civilian regimes have not been very comfortable with open media and an independent judiciary. All of them have tried to either suppress them or arm twist the judiciary, except that once or twice we've had different type of environment. A military dictator like Pervez Musharraf was quite relaxed as far as the freedom of expression was concerned, though he also got upset with the judiciary. Similarly, very reluctantly, I mean, I remember Benazir Bhutto's first period, she was also not too unhappy with with letting people say their bit. However, over a period of time, and that is what worries us the most, the whole thing is accumulated in a manner in which, depending upon who rules, who heads the army, at times you can crack down on the media. Even before this book crisis, some people used to just come to me and said, well, it never happened even in Zia's period. So that is how now the thought control is being exercised. ISPR became, some sort of a big tool of the state policy. Within the country, it was the so-called hybrid warfare, which prevented people from giving their or expressing their views. And outside, as far as the Indians was concerned, through social media and so on, the Indians also at times said, well, it seems that the ISPR is now more powerful than the ISI. Now, these are the development that was taking place. Later on, someone even said about 2.5 years ago that previously we used to employ gimmicks like, well, we have a security situation, we have war on our hands, there's a war on terror, but now we have found an argument that actually beats everything, and anything can be done under the umbrella of saying, since there is a hybrid warfare, so these things will not happen. This thing will not be said. Otherwise, the Indians might use it. The social media would be using it. And so, under that cover, I think very strict control has been exercised on the freedom of expression. I can still put spread the word to some of the selected people that the main media will not take it. Social media sometimes will. But even more disconcerting is, and we have believed in it for a long time, that independent judiciary, with which people, the regimes have been very uncomfortable, was still our hope. But one finds that at times they are pressurized to the extent where some people actually get worried. However, let me say that every reaction having its every action has its due reaction. Lately, I find that not the media as much, but some people in the judiciary, certain courts have started taking actions which may not be entirely, palatable to the establishment. So this is now the reversal of these things has happened, except that it will take its time, which normally it does. But I am quite hopeful that the judiciary is going to come back in due course and perform its role. The media so far, the normal mainstream media has not. And that is why more and more reliance on the social media.
Thank you, sir. My final question to you, rather than I would expect an opinion from a scholar journal, as I said initially, viewers. General Durrani, my question to you, the Jinnah's Pakistan, almost 74 years old now. Do we have to go forward or move forward as a nation of ostriches with this thinking and with this course of action by the civilian and military leadership, or we have to reverse the course to be a pride nation, sir?
I think this is probably the key question, or one of the very key questions. I addressed it in Pakistan Address to the best of my ability. The conclusion gets strengthened as I go along. One found out that talking about Jinnah's Pakistan, after that it was hijacked, like it always is, by people who were better organized than the others. And they happen to be not only the religious classes, but also the establishment. the business classes. So it became a country led by the interests of the elites. So it became an oligarchy, frankly. This is such a bad word, but I have to use it. That we, over a period of time, have become the type of oligarchy which does not let anything, any development takes place which may influence, which may help the masses, but which harms the interest of the privileged classes. Everything there would be scuttled because you do not want to lose. Within the institutions also have seen the reform is welcome as long I do not have to pay for it. Someone else should do that. Now, this is something that has happened to Jinnah's Pakistan, and instead of becoming, a country for the welfare of the masses, it is now a handmaiden in the hand of a few pressure groups, mafias, if you like.
General Durrani, I'm so grateful. Thank you very much. This was really an eye-opening conversation with you. Definitely in coming weeks, we are going to reconnect with another segment with you because you have a lot to offer to the station, sir. Again, Shahab Karni, appreciates your time, sir. We are greatly honored. Thank you very much, General.
Very much grateful, Khalid sir.
Thank
All
you,
the
sir.
best.
Thank you.
It's a
God bless.